Welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's event, Hope, Healing, and Recovery Exchange. Really want to warmly welcome everyone for taking the time out today. This theme of all of us needing to heal, so important right now. And we've been planning these virtual sessions for our community of healthcare workers and other community care workers as a place for us to reflect and to exchange ideas around recovery and healing. If you have any questions or comments, I just want to let you all know that the chat box will be enabled after the presentations are finished. I just want to remind everyone in this Zoom webinar format that it is being recorded. The goals today are to really honor the diverse experiences of all of you, the experiences of health and community care workers throughout the whole pandemic, and to really promote collective reflection, mutual support, and to encourage recovery. We have panelists here today that are going to share personal stories of overcoming challenges and building resilience from others on the front line of the pandemic. And lastly, we really want to promote and encourage the availability of resources, and we really want to make sure that you're aware that there's help out there if you need it. So my name is Joe Pelissari. I'm one of the co-facilitators today. I'm a clinical psychologist at St. Joe's here in Hamilton. I'm here today in my office in the Fontbonne building, and I've been involved in staff supports, healthcare worker supports since the onset of the pandemic. And I'll let the other co-facilitator introduce herself, Dr. Andrea Froelich.
Hi, welcome everyone today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Dr. Andrea Froelich. I'm the director of the Program for Ethics and Care Ecologies, or the PEACE program at Hamilton Health Sciences. And it's my great privilege to support staff and physician resilience at HHS in the pandemic and beyond. And I'm really looking forward to hearing these stories of challenges and resilience and strategies from our panelists today.
Thank you, Andrea. Our panelists today, we have three of them. Tara Hughes is a COVID-19 charge nurse. We also have Matt Harwood. He's from one of the long-term care facilities, and he works in recreation, therapeutic recreation. And lastly, we have someone from public health, Marilyn Belardo. Thank you, panelists, for taking the time to share your stories today. Wanted to acknowledge all of our partners who are supporting today's event with this wide range from hospitals to community agencies. Thank you for your support. Now, before we get to the first panelist, we want to engage everyone in a small exercise in creating word clouds. You may have seen word clouds before, but we thought this would be a good way to engage all of you today by asking three questions. And we're going to do this at various points throughout today's session. And so we would ask you all to visit this website, slido.com, enter the code 511899. And once you get there, you should see a question. And we'd ask you all to enter a response. And we should see a word cloud develop in real time. So the first question: what was your greatest challenge during this pandemic? So we'll give people a minute or so to enter their responses. I'm going to enter mine as well. We could see that being created. Yeah. thank you all for participating in that. There's so much to explore in these words, the challenges that you've all faced during the pandemic. So just give you a few more seconds before turning to our first panelist. Thank you. I'll now introduce our first speaker. Tara Hughes is a nurse who works on one of the COVID units. She's a charge nurse. And Tara, take it from here. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what you do and share with us your story.
Great, thanks, Joe. So hi, my name's Tara Hughes. I work here at St. Joe's on CTU Central. It's a clinical teaching unit. It's general internal medicine. And I've been here on this very floor for 30 years. So I usually alternate a month of charge and then a month of floor nursing. So today I have two stories to share with you. First is my personal battle with COVID-19. I became sick in March 13th of 2020. I was very sick. I was short of breath. I was dizzy, tachycardic. My heart raced up to the 170s. And I felt fatigue like I'd never felt before. I remember actually lying in bed trying to figure out how much life insurance I had for my two kids. They're grown adults, but I still was worried. I remember March was early in the pandemic, so I had no fever. In fact, my temperature was always below normal. I was always freezing cold. I hadn't traveled, so just getting a COVID test took me a few trips to emerge. I was never hospitalized. In fact, I never tested positive for COVID, but I can tell you, I've never been so sick in my life. Finally, at one point, I did have a respirologist tell me that she was sure I'd had COVID. It took me till September until I started to feel like myself again. Then at the end of November, it was my worst nightmare. I was sick again, and this time my swab did come back positive. I spent a total of 22 days this time in isolation with a whole slew of symptoms, which by then we all knew were COVID related. Again, it took me a long time to recover, so I guess you can definitely call me a COVID long hauler. Isolation was scary and it was lonely. So many thoughts went through my head both times. Did I give this awful virus to anyone else? How sick was I going to get? And then would I ever feel truly normal again? My friends, my family, my co-workers were absolutely amazing with lots of calls and texts and porch drop-offs. They were my big support. As I said, I work on CTU Central. We, as a group, started making comfort care baskets for all our staff when they would test positive for COVID and had to isolate. This was how our group rallied together. I have to tell you, when the girls came out to my house, which is an hour from Hamilton, on a cold, wintry day, I was overwhelmed. My basket was full of amazing stuff, full to the brim with goodies, new pajamas, a beautiful robe, a fuzzy blanket, candles, and of course, all my favorite candies. This is something I will truly never forget. Another saving grace for me during this rocky time was when I actually found the COVID Long Hauler Facebook group, support group. Let's face it, from March 2020, so much has changed from the signs and symptoms right to the treatments. I really found this helpful. It validated a lot of my physical symptoms as well as my feelings. It most definitely helped me feel like I wasn't alone with my multitude of symptoms. So as for my personal challenges with COVID, I'm finally starting to feel much better, thank God. I've returned to work again. Some days were super challenging. Let's face it, for any of you that have worn the full PPE, it's hot. So being short of breath and tachycardic and dizzy was not easy. My brain fog was real. This has been a big hurdle for me. I'm forgetful, I have difficulty concentrating, and sometimes I actually was feeling confused when I first came back to work. I remember in the spring trying to read something from my phone, and I literally could not read it out loud. The dots just didn't connect. I guess it's like having a concussion. I now have a million sticky notes on the go at all times. Frequently ask the same question, but it's getting better week by week. I have tinnitus in my ears. They ring all day and night, but I feel like I'm just getting used to that. I'm looking forward to the day that I can truly say that I'm back to the old Tara. The second part of my story, everyone, is about my home unit. We transitioned into the COVID ward here at St. Joe's, so my co-workers are truly the healthcare heroes. In the beginning, we had no idea what to even anticipate, how to nurse these patients, what would their care needs really be? Was COVID airborne or was it droplet? Did we even have enough masks? Were we going to take this horrible virus home to our loved ones? We were scared. We were all frightened, but we pulled together and we embraced it. I can tell you that none of us thought we would still be here today in the middle of it a year and a half later. The first round, the second, the third wave, all have been very different. In the first and second wave, it was usually older patients and they were immunocompromised. But with this third wave, the patients are younger, they're our own age, they have small children. So that makes nursing them more difficult at times. These patients change so fast and become critically ill before our eyes. We have learned so much in the last year and a half. We learned to cluster care and to cluster care efficiently. That means when you go into a room, you have to bring everything that you need. So you're bringing your meds, your blood work supplies, your IV supplies, your oxygen supplies, towels, personal care items, their meals. As I said, we're medical nurses, so we usually can't walk by a patient's room without going in. So we found this so different. We suddenly had to nurse with least exposure. We watched them through windows, we watched them on baby monitors. One of our challenges as a group was feeling isolated from the rest of the hospital. We felt the stigma of COVID-19 firsthand. We faced it every day. No one wanted to come to our end of the hospital. We took on a lot of extra duties daily. Throughout the pandemic, many of our staff have tested positive for COVID and have had to be off to isolate. We have had also many staff isolate because of contact tracing. So many of us knew the experience of isolation firsthand. We knew how it felt, being isolated from their families and how scared these patients were. We all could relate. St. Joe's has a wonderful 3-Wish program that purchased lots of iPads for us. Thank God for technology these days. I do believe that my staff are now all Zoom pros. We would help our patients Zoom with their families, with many tears being shed by both the patient and their families. But I'll tell you, the girls I worked with, the staff I worked with, they're the heroes. They would be crying as well. As for my CTU Central family, it was this team that was our resilience. Our bonds became stronger with each other and with our patients. We created a little community for ourselves. No one else really understood what our stresses and our pressures were, what we were going through daily. Not other departments in the hospital, not other nurses, or our family and friends. Nobody could truly understand. I can tell you that our staff has put in an incredible amount of overtime in the last year and a half. They are exhausted. You might think it's because there was nothing else to do, but honestly, it's because we didn't want each other to work short. We are very fortunate here at St. Joe's. We have a coping and resilience team. They came and supported us on our unit. Lucinda was our spiritual care support person. She would come up and put on her PPE and go in and pray with the patients. And then she would come out and pray with us. We had many open discussions about our stress, our burnout, our frustration at work and with the outside world. People not staying home, anti-maskers, non-COVID believers. This was a huge help. The CARS team was a fantastic resource for us. So personally, I can say that I am double vaccinated and I plan to enjoy the summer, take full advantage of the beautiful weather and be outside with my family and friends. I'm going to continue to tell my story of how sick I was, that COVID-19, it is a monster and it is real. I will continue to health teach and tell everyone the need for full vaccination. We all need to do our part and protect each other. And my amazing CTU Central crew, my fellow healthcare heroes, we will all continue to nurse, to care for the sick, and to provide compassion and empathy for all of our patients, and hope that this horrendous virus that they call COVID will soon just be a memory. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Tara. So powerful. Just taking it in still, and a few words of facilitation, connections, and social support. To me, was a very large theme in there. How you connected with online resources to help you in your recovery, particularly the support that you rallied within your team. That is just beautiful, and also the support that you accessed that was available to you. I think that's a really important theme. Some gratitude in there, and through your shout outs, I know how thankful you are for all the supports out there, and also elements of kind of meaning making, and also some growth there. Talked about learning, and I like the way you ended that on a hopeful note, and the hopefulness around vaccination. So those are some of my reflections. Andrea?
Thank you, Tara. Your story was so inspiring, and I appreciate your courage in telling your story both as a patient and as a healthcare worker and leader. I really heard a theme around self-compassion and needing to be very patient with yourself as you experience your own healing journey, as someone recovering from COVID, but also as a healthcare worker recovering from the overwhelm and exhaustion of the pandemic itself. And I really took away your persistence in facing every day, your determination to recover, but also being easy on yourself and recognizing these strategies that you've created to cope with brain fog and with some of the other sequelae of COVID are beautiful examples of how we can really accompany ourselves gently in our healing journey, whatever that journey looks like. So thanks for being a great role model of self-compassion for all of us. Thank you, Tara. So we're going to take a pause now and transition from Tara's story to our next story by doing another word cloud. So I'm going to ask our facilitators. Awesome. So the question is, what has helped you get through this pandemic? So take a moment to join into slido.com 511-899 and enter your answer. So a big theme we're seeing around family, supportive relationships, coworkers, friends, partner. Some themes around people's self-care strategies, yoga, social support, therapy, rest, dog walking, people drawing upon their faith community, mindfulness practice. And I like that there's a little nod toward our self-soothing, our Netflix, and our self-indulgence as also ways that have helped us get through. Thanks for your honesty, everybody. Beautiful. Crying if needed. I love that too. So maybe another 10 seconds or so to answer the question, and then we'll move on. Beautiful. Thank you for all of your responses and participation. It's my pleasure now to invite Matt Harwood to tell his story. Matt's had experience working through the pandemic in long-term care. So Matt, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, no
and
problem.
looking forward to hearing your story.
So my name is Matt. I worked recreation and long-term care during a COVID outbreak. I had worked there a couple years part-time. It was a good job. I can't really complain about it. I never really considered myself healthcare as recreation. I was kind of just there to make jokes, help people out with activities, and make sure the day was fun and well spent. But when the outbreak happened, it was pretty much all hands on deck. So I was always kind of a lazy guy, and that had to change really quick. You'd get in the morning and it would just be nonstop running. And my job also dramatically changed. It went from playing bingo on the weekly basis to booking FaceTime calls and making sure these people could stay connected to their families when they couldn't come in. I think my greatest challenge during this time was just like not a lot of people understanding it. I had my coworkers, which was great. They were really strong. It was a great team, especially going through this traumatic experience. It was very bonding. But talking to my friends and my family, it was a lot harder. And I'm getting better at speaking about it, but it's still not something I really like to dwell on really or dive too deep into. And during the pandemic, it was really hard to kind of continue going to work. I know there was a lot of times I wanted to quit when I walked back into that hotel room, kind of again as recreation. It was kind of, I'd ask myself, what am I still doing here? But whenever I'd go into work, I'd see these people I had known for a couple of years just fighting so hard. And I couldn't turn my back on that. It felt, the idea of leaving felt worse than staying, even though staying was pretty tough. But my coworkers helped me through it. And even the families of the residents I'd worked with, whenever I'd call to set up a FaceTime meeting, they'd talk to me and ask me how my day was, that what I was doing really mattered to them. And that really helped me power through it. I know even the residents, there's one that I think will always stay with me for the rest of my life. She was really sweet. I knew her for a couple of years. She unfortunately caught COVID, but I used to read to her every day, which she enjoyed. I don't even know if she liked the stories. I just read whatever I could find, but she enjoyed the time spent with her. And I know near her, unfortunately, final moments, I was visiting her before New Year's, and while I was talking with her, she told me how proud she was of me and how proud my parents must be of me to be doing this kind of work and helping out so many people. And I know on dark days when I think about what happened during my experience, that's kind of the shining light that keeps me on track. Another thing that helped me was I saw a flyer one day in our lunchroom for services at St. Joe's for healthcare workers, just to talk about the experience, because it was so hard to talk to people that I knew about it, because you kind of paint this picture of yourself and it's hard to break it. So it was really, that really helped me, just having someone to talk to and engage with, someone who had heard similar stories and kind of understood what I was going through. And through that, I got to meet more people at St. Joe's who really helped me come pretty far. Like I've talked about how much I don't like talking about it, but here I am talking about it, which is impressive to me at least. And it's helped me kind of talk to family and friends about it on a surface level. I don't dive into too many details. It's still not something I like talking about, but I know talking about it definitely helps. It always feels like a big weight lifting off my shoulders whenever I mention it or can at least describe what I went through. And a lot of people, when they hear about it, they don't really get it. And then to explain it just kind of seeing the look in their eyes and the whole sudden 180 of their understanding. It's nice to feel that validation of what you went through and how strong all of us are for doing this. During the pandemic, I definitely changed. Some ways not great, but a lot of ways pretty good. Like I said, I used to be really lazy. Unfortunately, I'm not anymore. My mom's really happy about that one. But seeing all my coworkers work so hard and kind of the hecticness of it and not really knowing what is happening kind of inspired me to help out in ways that I could help them, like joining the union and kind of getting a seat at the table to better help them when they needed PPE and delivering it to them and making sure they were staying safe. It kind of helped me realize I could be a leader in my own way and how strong I am as a person. And I think those values go to everybody who's been through this. And finally, looking towards the future, a lot of bad things happened during this time, a lot of bad things I witnessed, but I also saw a lot of good things. And I grew as a person in ways I didn't think I could. And I guess at the end of the day, I just kind of want to be at peace with my experience, the good and the bad, and just be able to look back on it and not feel so scared and alone. But slowly and surely I'm getting there. And I think even being here talking about it is a big step.
I hope so, Matt. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm so touched. I'm so touched by that, and also Tara. And there's 152 participants on this, and I think I speak for everyone. Just so touched and thankful for you being here to share that story in the way that you do. Very emotional, and you speak of this story of challenge and adversity, kind of being stretched outside your comfort zone, doing things that you never thought you'd do, seeing things that you never thought you would see. But you also saw some really incredible things too. And that story that you told about that resident really touched me, how important that was for her and for her family as well, for you to be there and to help her in those last days. And also accessing supports. I think that's such an important story to share too, Matt. So thank you for doing that. I know it's not easy to do that. But thank you for sharing that aspect too. And I really hope that you're recovering well. I wish you all the best in your recovery. And the last bit too around the growth that you've experienced from this. Really inspiring.
Thank you, no problem. Glad to be here.
And Andrea?
Ditto to all that. Thank you, Matt. And I would just add, what I feel so inspired in your story is your willingness to look at the hard parts of your experience and really look at it honestly, but not only see the hard parts, but also to see the goodness in the residents, the goodness in your colleagues, the goodness in the families that you are caring for. So I really appreciate this balanced perspective that you're trying to hold as you make peace with your experience, not to shy away from or deny how very, very hard it was. It's almost impossible for me to imagine, Matt, what you witnessed and experienced, but also to hold in your heart and your mind the positive aspects, the parts that were inspiring, and also to continue to hold up, the places where you've really grown through this experience, in your character, in your values, in your work ethic, in your sense of connection to your healthcare community, and your own sense of purpose. So I just really applaud the complexity of the story you've told and the kind of balanced perspective that you bring to that. I wish you so much. I wish you so well on your healing journey, and wherever you go next, I know you get to take these resources and lessons and this deepening character with you. So thank you, and wishing you all the best. All right, thanks, Matt. Let's take a pause again as we prepare for our next story. I'm going to do another Slido poll. So this question for all of us is, what have you learned about yourself and your own resilience through the pandemic? And take a moment to reflect on that and add your response. So hearing some themes, wow, stronger than I thought. That's getting a lot of votes and strength. I think Matt's story really exemplified that so beautifully. And a theme around it's okay to ask for help. Therapy can be useful. It's okay to take breaks. It's okay to be vulnerable. So really that intrinsic part of resilience that is about reaching out to ask for what we need, to ask for support. Optimism, the need for pause, perseverance, taking time for quiet. So 10 more seconds. It's beautiful to see these themes evolving in real time. Thanks so much to everyone for your participation. Great, beautiful. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Marilyn Belardo, who is a public health nurse and has been tracking this virus as a public health nurse since its inception. So Marilyn, thanks so much for being here today. Looking forward to your story.
Thank you, Andrea. So I work for Hamilton Public Health Services, as Andrea said, as a public health nurse, and I myself, along with many of my colleagues, was redeployed to work in COVID case management back in March of 2020. So this was something completely new for most of us. And just to give you a bit of background, all of the people in Hamilton who have COVID tests, their results are sent to the medical officer of health. So our job in case management was to contact people by phone, to let them know what their results were, their positive results, and then to find out how they were doing, what their symptoms were, perhaps where they may have picked the virus up, do a little bit of contact tracing, and give them isolation instructions. Along with that, we also would monitor people. So we would call them regularly to support them through their isolation. So if they were alone and they needed food, for example, we would make sure to arrange to have food brought to them. If they needed medications, we would make sure that that happened for them. Anything really that they needed, we were there to support them through that. Sometimes people just needed to talk to us, like they're alone and they're isolated and they're stuck in a room or a home alone. So we were there for them. The other thing that we did is we manned a phone line 7 days a week so people could call in to ask for what they needed or to have questions answered or just to really talk to us. So you can imagine that a phone call from public health during the pandemic was certainly not a call you wanted to get, and a call from us could turn your life right upside down in an instant. And so I can remember the very first call that I made back in March of 2020. And again, I had never done anything like this. It was a 42-year-old single mom. And when I called her and let her know that she was COVID positive, she burst into tears and she said to me, "Am I going to die? And what's going to happen to my 2 children?" And it shocked me at first, but really just the all the anxiety that this caused for people, especially back when we knew very little about it. So I could go on all day about all the stories of hardship that I heard and the stories of loss of loved ones, loss of jobs, loss of feeling independent, the struggle that people have been through this pandemic, the guilt that people feel because they contracted the virus and they perhaps might have passed it along to somebody else, a loved one that they're worried about. I had one mom concerned because she had passed it on to her children, and she was wondering what's going to happen in the future with my children now that I've given them this virus. So lots and lots of stories of hardship. And as nurses and as healthcare workers, we care. So a little piece of my heart went out to every single person that I talked to. And these were all strangers on the phone to me, but I felt like I knew them by the end of our conversations. So in terms of challenges, I would say the biggest challenge for me, and there were lots of challenges, but the biggest one was not only living through COVID and all the restrictions that all of us lived through in the isolation, not being able to travel, but working in it like all of us did, where you couldn't get away from it. So it was COVID 24/7. And then even when your friends and family wanted to talk to you, they wanted to talk about COVID. So I never got a break from COVID. And I think the worst time for me was in the fall during the second wave. Our case counts were super high. Our queue kept growing and growing despite 30 or 40 nurses working all day long, 10, 12 hours a day. We were exhausted. And we'd get to the end of our shift and the there would be more in the queue than there were when we started the day. So it was really a feeling of being overwhelmed, and new evidence was rapidly emerging. So our processes were changing and the things that we had to tell people was changing. So you had to keep up with all of that as well. So it got to the point where I was honestly overwhelmed, and I couldn't sleep. I couldn't shut work off. So through the night, things would be going through my head. And I guess I really hit a wall, and I knew I had to do something when my 22-year-old son came up to me and he put his hands on my shoulders and he looked down at me because he's a foot taller than I am. And he said, "Mom, I'm worried about you. I have never seen you this stressed, and your personality's changing." And I thought, wow, like I didn't really even notice that. I knew I was stressed, but I didn't think that I had changed. So at that point, I decided I needed to make some changes. And so I have to say, hands down, the number one thing that was helpful to me were my colleagues. I have the most wonderful, compassionate, caring colleagues in the world, and they understood what I was going through because they were going through the exact same thing. And so just reaching out and talking to my colleagues validated everything that I was feeling, and I didn't feel so alone because we were all feeling the same thing. I could talk to my friends and I could talk to my family. But if you tell somebody that your job is to call COVID positive clients and let them know that they're positive and do a case investigation, that doesn't sound like much because you don't understand the emotional impact that that has. But my colleagues understood that. So that was really the biggest support I had. The other thing is that I changed my perspective because I spoke to my husband and he said to me, people get through adversity. If you look back in history, they've gotten through world wars, they've gotten through the Great Depression, things that went on for years and years. So you just have to think of this as another one of those things. You can do it. And when you get through this, you're going to have stories to tell your grandchildren and you're going to be part of history. So I sort of changed my perspective. And instead of looking at work as a big negative or a big stressor, I tried to look at it more as a challenge and something that I knew I could get through. The other things I did, I tried to do a little bit more self-care. So I tried to start meditating to calm me down so that I could sleep better. I made sure I ate well. I made sure I got physical activity every day. So I either went for a walk or did a Zoom class. I did yoga. I started to write in a gratitude log every day so that I would remind myself just how lucky I was. And I think all of that really helped. We have wonderful supervisors at Public Health. Our supervisors and our manager are all nurses who have done all of this same work. So they understood and they supported us. We had team huddles and team meetings, and our associate medical officer of health came to support us at those meetings. We also had monthly town halls in our organization where our medical officer of health would sort of give us updates and tell us what the path was, where we were headed, because that was another big stress through all of this, was the uncertainty of where we were going with all of this through the pandemic. So all of that helped. And the other thing that was really helpful too, we had a wellness team that sent us out wellness resources every week in an email. And there were always links to things. And one of the links that I really enjoyed was a link to the aquarium in Toronto. And you could watch, it was a live feed of the fish. So sometimes I would have that on my home computer so that in between my calls, I could just sort of decompress, take a breath, watch the fish, and then clear my mind and call the next person. So I found a lot of the resources and the people were a huge help to me. In terms of moving on from this and how I have changed, First of all, I have to say that I realized that people are really good. I was calling people with probably the worst news they could get at this time during the pandemic. And by the end of the conversation, they were grateful and they were thanking me for what I was doing. So that really felt nice because I felt bad saying what I had to say to them. I'm making people stay home and be alone now for, 10 days, 14 days if they were a contact. So it was heartwarming that they were thanking me for what I was telling them. And then I think I realized how lucky I am, how absolutely lucky we all are. I'm more resilient than I thought. So all the themes that have come out in our little, in uh, our word exercise, and my colleagues, I've realized what wonderful, wonderful colleagues I have, and that we can get through anything if we work together and if we stick together and if we support one another, which is what we did. And I made many, many new friends through the pandemic because we all came together from all the teams that we were working on, and we worked on one big team. So I met lots of new people, and I'm so very appreciative for every one of my colleagues, and I'm so proud of everyone. And I just want to wish absolutely everyone in healthcare well, getting through all of this as we move forward and move away from this challenge, hopefully. So thank you very much.
Marilyn, thank you so much for sharing those perspectives from public health. I learned a lot, and certainly brought me back to that anxiety and the uncertainty at the beginning. And my goodness, the role that you played in public health and communicating with the public in those early days, and I could tell that you did that with such compassion. Appreciated your perspectives. Collegial support, I mean, that really struck me as well, and kind of touched by, certain points in your story. Sleep. I mean, how important is that? And I think, how that can be so effective when we're dealing with stress, and then those words that your son said, and I think, I don't know if that was a real turning point for you, but just kind of then in your story, sharing a number of practices, and thank you for that wide range of coping and practices that you could share with everyone. I love fish too, and we're always encouraging people to kind of continue to think about those practices and try to be creative. And even when you think you've exhausted all of them, keep thinking about them and keep looking for them, because they certainly can help. Thank you again, Marilyn. Andrea?
Thanks, Marilyn. A really inspiring story and a winding road. And I would just want to acknowledge the emotional labor that was an incredible part of your work, and an unacknowledged, I think, part of the work we do. We often focus on the to-do list and the tactics and the structures that we manage as healthcare workers, but that the emotional labor that making those phone calls and attending to the people in our community, providing them with education and support, that, it sounds like, really took a toll. But you also found your way through a way to navigate, to find balance between giving too much of yourself away, your heart breaking a little bit every single time, and also finding ways to fill your own cup. So just to underline what Joe said, I really appreciated, there were so many other things that were out of your control, but you realized that you have many things in your control, and you put your attention there. You can control sleep to some extent, how you take care of your body, your exercise, doing your mindfulness practice, connecting with people who support you. So I really appreciate that balanced perspective around recognizing when you were overwhelmed and focusing on those things that you could actually do within your control to support yourself. So thanks so much for that. So the chat box is now open. And so what I would welcome anyone who wants to as one of our attendees has just done, to say thank you, or to share a word or phrase or a reflection from anyone who's in the audience. We also want to take a moment to do a bit of a wrap up and to thank people, specifically all of our partners who have been supporting the creation of this event, and hopefully there will be future events like this that we will also make available to healthcare workers and community care workers in our community. So a big thank you to all of these community partners for supporting this event. A big thank you again to Matt and Tara and Mary Lynn and Joe for your facilitation of this event today. Your courage, your generosity, your vulnerability, and your inspiration have really warmed my heart, and I know will warm those of many others as well. We want to make sure that people are aware that there are resources available in our community. So if you are finding yourself struggling with things like sleeplessness, or you're having difficulty coping, or you feel like you want a safe place to connect to talk about the impacts of the pandemic on yourself personally and professionally, highly recommend reaching out to the mental health services at St. Joe's that are specifically tailored to health and community care workers. The website is right there. And that is a great way for those of you who are working in the community to get relatively rapid access to high quality mental health services for those of us in the Hamilton community who have been working on the front lines or in the boardrooms or in the back ends of our hospitals, but have been supporting our community through this pandemic. If you're interested in online resources, and some self-directed resources, you can go to the Hamilton Health Sciences COVID Resilient Support Toolkit. Lots of links to resources, mindfulness practices. Check in and check out toolkits and tools that people can use at the beginning and end of the day. And if you feel that you or someone you care about is experiencing an immediate mental health crisis, we encourage you to call Coast Hamilton. The number is there, 905-972-8338, and someone will answer you and attend to your needs immediately. So please reach out for support and care if you need crisis support now or in the future through Coast Hamilton. I really, again, want to thank all of the audience members for participating. I hope that you feel in this event today that whatever your story of COVID has been, you are not alone. Although each of us has a unique story and experience of this pandemic, we can see through the word cloud so many things that we do share: our fears, our anxieties, our reliance on team and colleagues for support, and the fact that this pandemic has both challenged us in ways we can never have imagined, but also created new opportunities for growth, for learning, and for the development of deeper character and deeper gratitude for the blessings of our life. So encourage all of us to continue our reflection and to recognize that the recovery process is a long and winding road and there's no end point to it. So I encourage you, as our panelists have demonstrated today, to be very gentle with yourselves through the ups and downs of the recovery process, recognizing that it isn't linear and that it will take time. So wishing all of you a wonderful weekend ahead and a great summer ahead, and watch for future events when we hope to reconnect as a health and community care community to support one another in our recovery and reflection process. Thanks again, everybody, for joining today, and have a great afternoon. Bye, everybody.